What's happening? What's going on, y'all? It's Crew coming in from the Black Lesbian Archives. I hope everybody's good. I hope everybody's doing great. Today, we're going to be talking about the printing press, okay, the journalism, the underground movement. I'm excited. First of all, I want to thank everybody that came to the oral history and scribe that we had. I will definitely have those videos up as soon as this series is done. But now we're going to be moving on to this topic, which I'm really excited about because I do believe, like, compounding onto the oral history and scribing and what, a little bit about what that meant. I think this journalism and printing press, I feel like we're going to see it in the ways in which we have done it before, but we're going to see it in new ways. Especially with Uranus and Gemini, I believe that we'll see different or newer inventions of what the printing press can look like that maybe uses, like, I don't know, instead of using like paper, we're using like recyclable paper in some way, and then we have some type of presser. Like I keep thinking of like a printing press, screen press, but we'll get to that because I don't want to get y'all tight on here. So basically, we're going to be talking about a little bit about newsletters, Zines, and underground print, specifically for Black lesbian liberation, as well as liberation not for only ourselves, but everybody else. All right. So, um, if you want to take notes, you can. If you want to, take a little, yes, baby girl, kill people, baby girls over here. You want to say hi? Come here. Okay, girl. Now she don't want to say hi. Anyway, come here, mom. Look who it is. Yeah, it's a pretty girl. Mm. I knew she was gonna do this episode start. Anyway, um, so we'll talk a little bit about the printing press and how it was birthed and like why it was birthed, right? First of all, first and foremost, it wasn't just a printing press that eventually just kind of came out of nowhere. The printing press was really originally. Um, we can see this in the 14s, we can see this in the 17s, especially in the 18s and onward. Different types of printing press from like the typewriters and things like that. Um, um, so many different things. Again, we'll get into it. I'm getting excited about talking about it. Um, what was I trying to say? Oh, basically, this printing press was, or the ways in which these things came, was because it was revolutionizing the system in the sense where the truth wasn't being printed out. They tried to censor even, yeah, I know, right? Even then, they were still trying to censor the truth. And so people started to come up with their own ways to get their own media out, their own press out, their own prints out. Eventually, those things got regulated, but it was something that we independently ran, we independently did. It's interesting because I had a conversation a couple of years ago, and everybody thought I was crazy when I said it, and I'm like, no, we gonna need it, like, um, and I promise y'all I'm gonna jump into it. I know I'm jumping all around the place, but where I talked about how eventually we're going to need our own mailing stations. Like eventually we're going to get to the point where we're going to have to be sending out our own mail. We're going to have like, community, people who are mailing things from driving, from boats to cars and things like that to get information and news. Because I do believe that we are going to see a decline of social media. It's not to say the internet is not going to be around or these spaces aren't going to be around, but I think that we're going to see a lot more people start to leave the phones. They're going to start to leave, certain spaces on the internet, and we're going to start to see more gatherings in person and things, which why this printing press and journalism is so important, and everything else that surrounded this. So the birth of it that we can see is, like I said, roughly around those times, where it shifted from big governmental style religious leaders and authorities who had their own hand in what could be said, what couldn't be said, and things like that to more independent. People were like, well, how can we get the word out, or how can we get the news and things like that out without having to go again through censorship? So we've seen, information basically again going from an independent space. People were um, also too not just individually but also collaborating and building their own spaces, um, and this is like mass distribution that was happening here. So we would have the material that we needed in order to, people were independently funding or getting their own resources and material to make whatever it is that they were going to make, and then they would distribute it individually. I mean, of course, like I said, in collective collaboration, but it was still independent, completely separate from the big corporations and governments and things like that. It's not to say that these spaces weren't being raided. It's not to say things weren't being burnt down, or it didn't have its own set of girl. It didn't have its own set of problems. I'm sorry, I keep wiggling around because she's all on me. But it's not to say it didn't have its own set of problems. Yes, mama. Yes, yes, yes. It didn't have its own set of problems, but it did. I'm trying to do a video, La Mama. All right. Um, sorry, y'all. She's been snuggly lately, very very much so lately, more than usual than when I first met her. Yes, baby girl. And I cherish it. Okay, but anyway, Um, this was when I say underground, or when I talked about the underground printing press, I say underground because it allowed for revolutions to be organized without basically being surveillanced, right? um, Ideas were spreading quickly, news was spreading quickly, the word was spreading quickly through these independent channels and things like that. So I do believe, like I said, because everything is being tracked on the internet, everything's being tracked on our phones. We have, look, I mean, even my camera that you see right here, like we're always 24-hour completely under surveillance. Even if you turn your phone off, even if you turn things on your computer off, laptop off, it's Big Brother's always listening, as they say. So there's no space that you can go where we're gonna be able to talk about things quietly, unless we do it in a different way, is what I'll say, right? So going back to pamphlets, handouts, magazines, Zines, you know, um, even language, right? Coded languages and things like that are also going to be um, on the they're also going to be on the table as well as we move into this new era in this new world, as we are moving into this new era in this new world. Um, so we have going from the oral history and also the scribes. We had the griots also, speaking to the village and spreading word through the village. Also, like I talked about, word of mouth. Well, in this situation and what's happening, we have the printing press that spoke to the masses. And also with the printing press, I will also say this, is that um, when you print, or after you print, or as you are printing, it's hard to erase the information. With the internet, again, we go from a space where this information can be deleted with a snap of a button. You feel me? But with the printing press, once you print it, it's in stone. I mean, unless somebody has like some type of magical eraser, does some type, magic. You feel me? That information is going to stay. You feel me? So this is some of the things that we're looking at and looking into when we are uh, moving into a new space. And I do believe that there's going to be, like I said, not only old methods, but newer methods that also come into play when we're talking about this. I, I know, a pretty girl. It's Queen V right here. But also too, when we get to the next topic is where we talk about the um, Black and African diaspora um, engagement with print as well. Uh, at one point in time, for those of you that don't know, especially as people were being enslaved, specifically in Africas and Black Americas and things like that, we weren't allowed to read and write, right? Um, we were killed, right? Let's just be frank, from being able to read and write. It was something that was forbidden. People would be killed. People would have their, slashed out the tongue. They're being poisoned by indigenous plants and things like that, so people couldn't speak and their mouths would be swollen. People would get their eyes chalked out. Like it, yeah, it got like that. Even some people, their hands as well too. So it got to a point in a place where people were like, well, how are we going to be able to still spread the news, or how are we going to be able to still spread the message, maybe even without speaking, if need be. And I know, y'all, it's a lot to, I think, historically, to have to go through to, like, when I'm thinking about this stuff, and doing these videos and things, and even just having these conversations and stuff, it just makes you wonder, like, dang, like, we really, it sometimes it like baffles my mind that we are even having to think that we have to be so low about the moves and things like that that we're making in order to be, I wouldn't even say safe, but in order so we can like communicate and things, like we have to be on the hush or sneak. And it's crazy living in these timelines, because it's not just this timeline, it's multiple timelines that we've lived where we are having to like sneak around and organize underground and stuff like that. It's insane, but I digress. So this is one of the things that were happening to enslaved people. And so, one of the first black newsletters, the radical newspapers that we can see, and there were many that popped up at this time, but we'll just use some examples here of self authorship. You can see was the Freedom Journal, which was in 1827. It was the first black owned newspaper in the U.S. We have Maria Stewart from 1803 to 1879, which was the first black woman to speak publicly and publish also political essays and newsletters about what was going on in the world, and also like personal public. And that was also a big thing too, is poetry, um, poetry, prose. Um, Speaking about the things that was going on, music was also an usher of that too. I know we're not talking about music specifically, but that was also an usher as well too. Y'all all coming in here. What's up? What's good? All the cats is migrating around to tell for the story. But printing became this key to abolition, resistance, um, existence, organizing, and also like really discovering like who we were, but also connecting us with, and not just for the organizing sake, but also connecting us with people from around the world and around the way. News also traveled very fast. I know we have like this push of a button energy that comes from like our phones and stuff like that, but the algorithms is what gets us, right? With the printing press and having things like specifically, in your hand, in your face, and things like that that can't be um, changed and things like that. First of all, you meeting people one to one, you having conversations one to one, or even if you just meeting somebody in passing, you meet people one to one. That's connection. And then also too, there's no middleman energy of like filtering out what is being said or what is being exchanged when, where, or why. So when you get on the ground and you're actually handing out this information, oh, it travels so fast. So just imagine, like, seeing. So I don't really see newspapers like that. Like everybody's on their phones and stuff. So I don't really see people on like reading newspapers. Shoot, I barely see people reading anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like physical media and things like that. I barely see books and things. Sometimes when I bring books to different places and stuff, people kind of look like, because it's crazy when you think about it. Like it's so crazy when I actually think about like what what I'm saying? Like how far removed we've moved on from, I don't say moved on, but like, I'm not saying it's not still happening, but it's just how far we've moved away from a lot of these traditional or spaces that we were in so quickly. And again, I'm a millennial, so like I've seen what it looked like before and like what it looks like now. So, and it's crazy because we have all these other generations that are growing up that have never seen or didn't bear witness to that. Like all they know is their phones, all they know is technology, the internet. So it's gonna be so crazy when this stuff continues to crumble, limited internet access, limited, what I mean? Or like maybe even get to the point where you have to pay to be on the internet and stuff like that. So news is going to be in the streets. News is going to be, like I said, passed on via mail, things like that, via, um, and it won't be the traditional mail either. That's why I said we're gonna start seeing a lot of like, you know, transports of mail and things like that through these different mediums that we'll see cars, boats, or ships. I was gonna say planes. I mean, they making little stuff here and there, so you never know, right? We probably gonna be seeing flying cars and flying spaces and things like that, or the drone era where they're also doing like deliverables and things from far away places. So that's another thing that I can keep in mind too. Um, and then if we talk about like black women, also too, like different black women that were in print culture during these times coming up, we have one, Ida B. Wells, which was an investigative journalist who used pamphlets to document the lynchings that were happening. Um, I'm sorry, y'all. It's just yeah. And then so it turned journalism into some sort of a weapon to basically document state to state violence, global violence, if you will, but specifically state to state violence and things that were happening in different places. And I will say this, okay, because I hear a lot of people talk about, well, uh, you know, we ain't better than our ancestors and things. Our ancestors, you know, we are better than our ancestors and things, or we basically bigger than the program our ancestors. I'm gonna say this: even though it was not documented, okay, of the revolts and riots that were happening in these different places, oh, they were going on. Why do you think Ida B. Wells, people like Ida B. Wells, was documenting this information? They're documenting this information because it directly, um, basically put like a pinpoint as to where this stuff was happening and was going on, and people were revolting against it. Yeah, it happened, but that's not to say that there wasn't anything surrounding it. I'm not saying that in every single place this was happening, but yeah, there were revolts and riots and all kind of stuff going on. And this wasn't just people protesting with signs, you know what I'm saying, to get a picture on Instagram, right? Like, no, these were people who were coming with the weaponry, okay, in hands, to these spaces to really actively protest these spaces. And when asking the governments and the Ku Klux Klan members if they could make peace with situations, they was getting real active. So this is why a lot of this stuff was also being documented, and also to document the people who were killed over these spaces, so people could know people that were passing on. And like it, the layers run deep, the waters run deep. You feel me? So this is some of the things that were happening. And also we have Amy Jarquise Garvey, which is an editor of the Negro World, which spread Pan African consciousness throughout the newspapers. All right, um, and I do believe, especially now, we are going to we are. I want to say we're going to start to see. I think we're in the middle of a renaissance, an intellectual renaissance, and also a spiritual renaissance of the mind, body, and soul connection of um, the most that I can say to kind of sum it up is like who we actually are. And I said this in my last video, but I'm gonna say it again. It just makes you wonder why at this particular time. It's not to say that this stuff hasn't been going on, because it's been going on for centuries, but why at this particular time, in the height of social media, at the height of these technologies, why are they choosing to do this now, right? Like, again, It's been happening. So it's not like it just hasn't necessarily been fully publicized, but now we are seeing the direct, um, at least I would say for America. I mean, we've been seeing it once again, but I think just at this level of what we're seeing, or which we're seeing it in this time. Again, it's happened many lifetimes over, but in this time, in a different way with the technology that we have available to us. Imagine if we didn't have the technology. Imagine if we didn't, you know what I'm saying? We didn't have this available to us and we didn't know what was going on. Now, with the rise of, the artificial intelligence, not everything that you see is going to actually be the reality of these different situations. You feel me? But for the most part, hand on foot, a lot of people are starting to see that, there's a lot of things that have been going on. Like, wait, that's happening in your state? Oh my God, this is happening in my state. So imagine print, right? Like, imagine things being printed, documented dates, times, things like that, people writing in, you know, doing their story and things like that, exchanging information and stuff. Like, imagine what that would look like, from community to community, especially at this time. I mean, I think it's even more, it was potent then, but I think it's even more potent now because if we start to really dis, uh, engage from social media and just online spaces, and we start meeting up in person, I don't think this, I don't know if this generation or the generation that we're in now is going to be completely ready for the impact that will have because it's not something that we're used to doing. Hell, we barely even write each other handwritten letters. So imagine this being printed and being circulated so quickly from community to community that they're not going to be able, especially if we're doing this independently, they're not going to be able to take everybody's, you know what I'm saying? That's why they're trying to lock the grid down. That's why, exactly why they're trying to lock the grid down. Anyway, I digress once again. We could look at people as Audre Lorde, another one, published her own works in the mainstream when she was getting rejected. So now she's like, well, shoot, let me, start my own stuff. And other collectives as well that joined in to start their own stuff as well, such as Barbara Smith, right? Um, Black Lesbian Feminist Press, and creating a published house, a publishing house for people to be able to print and things. So we like, yo, I mean, if y'all don't want to print us, then we'll figure out a way to do it ourselves, and we'll get the stories and messages out ourselves, and we'll spread the information that we want to spread ourselves without needing it to be approved or people feeling their lives because of the things that they're talking about and speaking on in terms of identity or terms of what's actually really going on. Ah, mm. I'm sorry, y'all. I just, man, it's, let me not think too hard about it because I mean, I think hard about it, but anytime I think too hard about it, I'm always like so taken aback because I think living through it, right? I think living through, these times, living through this timeline and these timelines, like the average person, I think, I mean, I wouldn't even say the average person because I'm nowhere near average, but it would probably drive someone really insane, and I'm not trying to like spread any like, whatever, but I think it's just crazy looking at like these different patterns from generation to generation. Just like all people had to do in order for their voices to be heard and not suppressed. You know, it just, I think it's like it just wasn't about like it wasn't just about printing press, right? Like, or it wasn't just about being, this oral stories and scribes and things. And not only in the space of like remembering, right? But the fact that we've had to like find other alternatives because our voices were being silenced. And like, yeah, it shakes me up sometimes when I really like take a step back and like really take in like what I I've seen, you know. And like I said, this has been generational, of the things. And we see like these dips of the high rising of it, and then something happens, and then it goes low, and then something high rises over there. And a lot of times, what I see, what happens usually has to do with like not just violence, but a lot of it has to do with like some type of drugs that was being put into it, some type of virus or diseases that were being put into the communities that kind of threw people off. Like when the morale gets up, then there's something that comes in to try to distract or disturb the energy or opposition, right? The opposing figures and things, the stoops at the doors and all that kind of stuff that usually, sometimes come into the mix and throw everything off. So yeah, it is definitely something that I've, I feel like I've had to make. I wouldn't say I've made peace with per se, but it's always something that I think about when I'm talking about this stuff because it's just like, yo, are we in the upside down? But anyway, so let's talk about the rise of zines and underground publishing that was happening in these different times. So, and this wasn't just in like the 80s, 90s. I know I focus on 60s, 80s, 90s. I know I focus on that particularly, but this even traces back, 1800s back. You know what I'm saying? 14 back. Like the lore goes deep, right here. So zines, those just short for magazine, basically became like short DIY, like little booklets um, that people had in order to be able to tell. And the thing about it is, zines, magazines, zines, you could tell whatever story you wanted. It didn't just have to be one the keys, but it was an easier, simpler way to be able to tell these stories with if you didn't have, like, let's for example say that you didn't necessarily have the resources to make an entire or to print an entire because that was another thing. It was about like having like the resources or the money. Then people would print, self-publish and self-print, zines or magazines that they can actually pass out to the people and tell these different stories or whatever it is that they wanted to talk about here. And so that was also a big thing. It also allows you to get really creative sometimes, especially with like different software that you would use. Um, Maybe it was like a little bit more limited in the stories that you could tell. So people started to get like real creative. Like I said before, like the little Microsoft programs and stuff kind of came, and publishing works kind of came into the um, the mix. They would have these also platforms as well too, or the zines as well too, so you can get kind of creative with unlimited restrictions as much as you needed and wanted. So roughly around like the 70s to the 90s, the black lesbians, the punk feminists, and activists actually used copy machines, right, staplers and typewriters to also create, uncensored media and things as well here too. I talk about it a lot, and you can also find this on the Substack as well under, I think, Her Stories, if I'm not mistaken. But one big example that I use and I'll always use forever is the Ashe Project in Oakland, California. This was a independent printing press, if you will, but it was also a collective of black lesbians who came together to, first of all, commune. That was the first thing, to meet, to physically in person, and then in order to honor that connection and to keep that connection going, they actually created a newsletter for black lesbians to stay connected and keep in connection with each other. And eventually it became not only a space that people were meeting in person, not only a space that people were building and speaking through writing, through again the magazines, the newsletters, um, it actually became a connection between worlds. So from Oakland to Berlin, and also internationally as well. Like I said, you can check that out, the video or the clip out, the story out, I should say, on Substack. I think under her stories, if I'm not mistaken, just to kind of see an example of what that looked like in those times. Using the resources that we have available to us. We have so many resources available to us, and if we can't go the route of being able to print because it's expensive, then we find other ways. We find new ways, right, to do it. We invent new ways to, spread the messages and things like that. So that's why I said I do believe we are going to see the rise of this way of telling these stories from multiple different perspectives and from multiple different media styles as well too, beyond the internet, right? So the purpose of the design, our Zines, our newsletters, again, range was to bypass mainstream media, also to speak on hidden communities or niche communities directly, without having to go through an authoritative or cop blocking, hater blocking, spaces where we could freely speak without, being turned down or reprimanded because of what was in these media pieces here. And then we've seen, this also was reforming and forming resistant networks, survival guides and healing circles. Um, there was a lot of, I would even say specifically during this time, those of y'all that are into astrology, it's so interesting. You can actually see the parallel energy from these times, specifically if we want to go like to this, I would say late 60s into the 70s, maybe in a little bit of, I would say the 80s, 60s to 70, 80, maybe even early 90s era. There's very parallel, not the exact transits, but like very parallel transits and things that were happening and themes that were happening during these times, especially like that Aquarius, Scorpionic energy, Scorpio energy here, that was like kind of parallel from that time specifically. Uh, we also have the preservation, preserving our culture outside of the institutions that were also, I should say, a means of control, of who gets to tell what stories, who is sharing what stories, um, who is creating memory, right? Also accessibility, like who actually has access to these stories, things like that. We can see here as well too. Some examples that we have. One, like I mentioned before, the Ashe Project in Oakland, Berkeley, California. We can also see Ezelia, which was a magazine for third world lesbians from 1977 roughly to 1983. Um, we can also see Onyx, which is a black lesbian newsletter as well in the same area. I think Onyx is in Oakland, California. Let's see. We also have, yeah, I think it was in Oakland or in California. The Lesbian Connection, which is actually still running to this day. And it's a funny story about Lesbian Connection as well too is before it, and I think I don't know because I haven't gotten in a long time. I used to get them back in the day, but when they were sending out their newsletters, they would send it in a pamphlet that actually hid the actual name of the space. So it would be like women's group community or something like that. But then when you opened up the envelope that it was in, it was like the lesbian connection, right? Just so like when people were getting stuff, sent to their spaces or sent to their homes, yeah, they wouldn't be thrown in the trash or worse, things. So there was like a lot of coding that was happening as well here too. Um, and then we have the ooh, um, Oh, we also have the Sea Lady River Collective, the Kamai River, the River Collective. Um, yeah, I have a couple stories about this particular collective. I won't get on this now. It's the Kambahi is stories that were passed down from elders that have told me their own personal stories about, this like what was happening around this collective as well. But it was also printed and distributed uh, by hand. I'm sorry, y'all. My bad. Mm, I had a good workout. My body is sore, a little sore today. But yeah, so those are also distributed hand by hand as well. And yeah, the Zines, the newsletters, the underground presses, it was, I keep saying a coded language because, I mean, essentially it was a coded language for all of us to be able to connect, but really and essentially it was for us to completely break away from uh, this mainstream media. I think of it as like a conduit, a connector of not only one particular community and what was happening in the field of community, but multiple at the same time. And while we are under the energy of Pluto and Aquarius and Uranus and Gemini, right? Uranus and Gemini happening for 7 years. If you want to look that up, you can. Uranus and Gemini, Pluto and Aquarius, right? That's going to be happening for the next 20 some odd years, right? it we getting back there, right? Like we're getting back to a time and a place where these things were frequent and also where we had to use alternatives, Aquarius, to communicate, Gemini, right? So we're going to see a lot of these seeding communities breaking off from the government, these systems that are living kind of outside of the lines of what we see now that are going to be kind of self-running, right, through community collective spaces and things. So you might be asking yourself, okay, well, why now? Like, why should we, return to this printed space, right? This independent journalism spaces, right? Well, again, digital platforms are censoring everything, right? Shadow banning, disappearing our voices. Also, too, again, the algorithm is controlling quite literally everything. So if the algorithm says that they no longer want to view this information for some whatever reason, they can do that. They can pass that information on. Also, too, we can't fully trust digital media. Why can't we fully trust digital media? And granted, I know some of y'all might be saying, well, what about print? You can change print and lie in print and things. Yeah, you can, but it's printed. I mean, like I said, unless you got some type of magical powers where you can change the print itself, like by hand in some way, shape, or form, then it's not going to be something that you can just all the way, like, we'll know for the most part. If you know, you know. It's kind of energy here. And then if we're meeting in person and things, you can also see stuff for yourself if need be, if it gets to that, which I'm pretty sure it will get to that as well too. And again, going back to like algorithms, we can't be relying on those because again, they're going to push out what you want. Print is also, it is permanent. Print is physical and it can be passed down from generation to generation to generation without worrying about those things being things. Also, handwriting too. Now, I'm not saying I mean, you could do photocopies of your handwriting as well. That's also another thing that people will probably start doing as well, is like writing things out and then copying their handwriting and things to, insert in different ways. I don't know why, but I just keep thinking of, how people make like shirts or press on shirts and things. Like I see that, but with print, like hand printing, like information, but with. And maybe that is something that I've seen somewhere. I'm not sure, but I see like a manual, something manual happening to be able for us to print things out. I don't know. Also, too, one thing I did not mention, but I want to say again, I do believe that people are going to go back to um, film photography. I think there's going to be new ways to make film photography inexpensive. We're going to start to see the little red rooms with the coffee beans, to make photography, print, things like that. And I do believe that there will also be a mix of technology. I'm not all, antique. I do believe the merging of things, especially if they can be done in a way that is equally, supported to our ecosystems and environments that don't necessarily extract from it, but also like give to it. So I think we'll be seeing a lot of that as well too. Um, Now, a print design can be hidden, right? It can be burned, right? Because it's physical. It can be passed from hand to hand. It can also be, pulled back up and resurrected out the grave. And so when we are going through, and as we are going through this digital collapse, we'll always have something to be able to hold if something, or if need be, right? We can bury these things. We can hide these things. We can pass these things along. All this stuff can be happening with or under this new world that is opening up right here. So even after our digital landscape has completely been burnt to the ground, we still can rely on our physical to keep us afloat, even if they're burning the books. We can still make copies and pass them elsewhere, right? Okay. So I want to I want to kind of conclude y'all with this, right? Um, I think the now, right, of not only thinking about what we can do with printing press, and I know there's a lot of like Zines and things like, and postcards and like it's all out there for us to have. But I think really leaning more into this as we are going through this digital collapse, even electricity, internet, all that stuff, going under fire. I think this is something that we can collectively, communally start together. Um, and I think also I think also sharing skills as well too in different communities of like, how do we do this? How are we, printing, pressing, within your community? Can we use those skills in our community? How are we getting information to each other? And thinking about all the ways that we are connected and communicating, i.e. example that I just brought up, people driving or in some way, shape, or form delivering mail independently to each other, because it's going to get to a point, y'all. These phones is going to become limited access for specific users. Do they still want to monitor everything that we do and the things that we post and things? Yeah, they're going to try to continue to do that. Do these cell towers follow our every move and words, and can they listen to us on our phone? Yes, they can. Our computers, everything. All of this is running under one big regime, right? In the eye, right? But there are ways around it, right? So I think staying creative, um, not only staying creative, but getting into a place of like, okay, well, how can we think of new ways to make these things work simultaneously at the same time? I think it's gonna be gold. You feel me? So, I think I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up here. I hope that y'all are enjoying this series. Again, like I said, I will definitely make this available once the series is over. We have one last one, the future, which I'm going to get into a couple of different things on the physical and also the digital landscape of what these things could look like in the future. So I hope that y'all are. Um, ooh, ooh, ooh. I hope that y'all are doing good. I hope that y'all are doing well. And yeah, I'll definitely see y'all on the next video. You already know what it is. Checking out.